Hey guys, welcome to the Smart Venture Podcast. In each episode, we're going to have conversations with some of the top investors, superstar founders, as well as well-known tech company executives in Silicon Valley. We'll have a coffee chat with them to learn their way of thinking and actionable tips on how they build or invest in a successful company. Before we start our show today, I want to make sure the listener, aka you, understand that everything a person say on the podcast only reflects hers or his own opinion, not the show or the company they work at. Our guest today is the president of learning services at Chegg. He focuses on the execution of Chegg's existing learning services business and its global growth strategy. He started his career at Chegg as the Director of Business Development and Product Management. Prior to joining Chegg, he worked in several sectors of the publishing industry and was responsible for developing a business intelligence platform that is used in higher education industry for monitoring sales and adoption trends. His name is Nathan Schultz. In the last episode, we had the first part of the conversation with Nathan. We talked about how Nathan transitioned from traditional business into tech and his personal and career growth early on in his career. In this episode, we'll cover more towards how he navigated the leadership role and learn more about his management journey. Please enjoy. For people who just started their career trying to modeling themselves after you, and they're ambitious, they want to take more responsibilities, how should they go after their goal? How should they have the conversation with the management team? What would you do if you're advising your younger self?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, I would make sure the things I'm working on are going really well. And all too often I see that Chegg and other companies, nothing today is an isolated project. Everything is cross-functional, right? It's like just the reality of the world we live in, especially in technology. You're always going to have some cross-functional nature to it. And so, for young leaders, the first order of business is being able to truly manage cross-functional programs and owning your own destiny. And I talked a lot about that with our product teams around, because the product teams, they own certain aspects of it, but you got a whole engineering team that's building stuff for you, and they may not even be part of the same business line. They may be part of some shared services, and you're going to have to own your own destiny. And so, for me, it is that's number one. Learn how to and know how to operate in a cross-functional environment, because that's going to be your key to success as you continue to scale. Second is find the areas in the product that you're passionate about. Right? Don't think about it just in terms of our company, but think about it in terms of our ecosystem. And then, exactly what you said. Start having discussions with your manager, with your manager's manager. Like you should. There's no I have one-on-ones throughout the organization, not just with my team. I cringe at companies that don't have a open desk policy in my mind. Like we, as executives, we should. One of our jobs is to make ourselves accessible to employees, right? Regardless of level, and give them time and give them the respect that they're due, and talk to them about their careers and their passions, and as they fit the organization, make sure those people have opportunities to jump in those things. And so, as young leaders, it's about first and foremost making sure the stuff you're working on is going really well. Right? If that's going really well, the people around you will notice, and the people around you will want you on their teams. Second, it is about really asking yourself, what are you passionate about? And understanding that. And once you understand that, then it's about spending time with executives to not just about asking them for more, but just allowing them to get to know you, right? And you getting to know them. And that personal relationship, I've seen it time and time again, catapult people's careers, because they've taken the time to establish a relationship and taken the time to establish a reason to be in the room.
You mentioned some really good points here. Doing a good job at your current position, being good at doing work cross-functionally, finding areas that you're passionate about, and letting the management level know you better. Speaking of letting the management team getting to know you, you're the president of learning services. If I just joined your company, how should I let you know that I exist?
Absolutely. And one-on-ones are a great tool. And that what I recommend for folks that are going to ask a leader for their time, or a person of C staff or executive staff for a member of the time, make sure you come prepared, right? I mean, they're not. They obviously want to be there to give you context about the company, but it's really an opportunity for me to spend time with people and understand how do they think, how do they problem solve, how do they deal with interpersonal issues, because we don't always have all the same facts that they have, right? They're sometimes living that motion or that day in a motion picture, and management, many times we're living our days in kind of still pictures, single images. Right, because that's the data that we're given and the data that we're provided versus the teams that are in the trenches every single day. And so it's about using those times really wisely and being prepared. It shows so much, in my opinion, and I know that those people respect my time, and I respect their time as a result.
I'm sure nowadays a lot of young people come to you for advice. Back in time when your career just started, who would you ask for advice? How did you get the mentorship back in time? And what were some advice that you got early on that you found really helpful?
So I can still remember my first one. I asked the president of North America, Pearson North America, which is not a small job since the U.S. was their largest market. A gentleman by the name of Jim Benke, and I saw him in an elevator, and I said, "I'd love to get 30 minutes of your time." And I was a marketing manager, like just somebody in the building somewhere, right? And so this is easier said than done. Is just don't be afraid to ask. Because half the time, I want the meetings with employees, because I get to learn not just about them, but I get to learn about the culture in either the people who just joined. Certainly for managers and directors, I meet all of them within the first 3 to 6 months and ask them a series of questions about what's good, what's bad, what would you change, why would you change it, how do you think we can become a better culture. But as I think Jim at the time was probably running 15,000 employees. He doesn't have the time to reach out to me, so and I shouldn't expect him to. And so my recommendation is have the courage. The worst thing they can do is say no, but the last thing they're going to do is say no, right? Because you're an employee of their company. They want to hear from you. So. So the key advice is just ask people, right? Be cautious of not over asking. It's probably not a good idea to ask for a one-on-one session every single week. But ask for the sessions, and ask for the time. The people that I surrounded myself with early on, I've always surrounded myself with a technologist, a CTO, if you will. At every company I've worked with, I've always gravitated towards a CTO. Why? Because it's the one area I know the least about. Right? I understand content. The business side is not that complicated at the end of the day, unless you're in the M&A side of things. You're in complicated structures. The basics of business is the basics of business. You're either making more money than you're spending or not, right? You got enough runway, you don't. But the one area that for me that was always kind of a black box, and still is with as technologies evolve, is being partnered with a really strong technology partner. And whether that's someone who is a peer to me at my age now, at my level now, or before that was someone that I could just look up to and ask questions about. And believe me, the technology people many times want to talk business because they don't get an opportunity to talk business a lot. So they were always like, well, if you're asking me all these questions, I'm going to ask you all of these questions, because they get to, their world's more on the technology side. So they're not always in the business decisions. And so they don't always get the same context. And so for me, it was very helpful to find a partner in a skill in a knowledge area that I knew that I was deficient in. That way, when when I had ideas or had thoughts or wanted to go in a certain direction, I didn't do that in just a very myopic frame. I did that in a way that tried to balance the prerequisites for that, or the priorities for that, or the complexities for that. And so finding people that have different opinions as well as different skills, extremely critical.
I love it. It's a really unique answer. If you're not someone who knows how to code or have the fundamental technical knowledge, how would you navigate the conversation? And what would you talk about in the first conversation?
Yeah, first I'd say hi. Honestly, in the first meeting, you're really going to get into any great depth. No, but you can talk about, if you're working for the same company, you can talk about the challenges of the organization. You can talk about the direction of the organization. You can talk about the things that you're working on that you're excited about and why you're excited. It doesn't have to be simply, let me grill you about this technology I don't understand. What you're going to find out is that, when as I always say, if you exude enthusiasm about something, that's contagious. People around you are going to be like, why is that person so excited about this? Maybe I should be so excited about this as well. And, if you go in there and you start talking about these programs you're working on and why they're important and how they're impactful, that person's going to want to ask questions. Those questions are going to feed another question. That the end of that dialogue is going to start to form a relationship. And for me, I guess conversation was always a natural thing. I understand it can be harder for others. But for me, thankfully, it was a natural thing. So for me, it's not about coming in guns a-blazing and with all these questions. It's just about trying to create a common field for you to have a conversation on. And because you work for the same company, there's so many topics that are right in front of you that every single thing you probably don't even think about. But there really are. It just takes a moment to stop, breathe, look around, right? Shut off email for maybe 10 minutes, shut up Slack for 10 minutes, right? And just think and you say, well, if I had to present to somebody about what I'm passionate about, what I do every day, or what's really interesting right now, or even some data fact that I found out about customers, like, how would I do it? And you start those conversations off that way, and you show that you're someone who shares information and someone that's interested in hearing their opinion. And frankly, people will not stop talking, right? That conversation will go on.
Yeah. So in terms of the end goal of these conversations, would you say is to get a better understanding of the technology application side of things so you could use the knowledge to create better product or services? If I'm having the conversation with my startup CTO, what should I try to take away from the conversation?
Yeah. I mean, so first off, there's always a desire to have a deeper, I call it deeper than dangerous, because some people they have cursory knowledge, so they're dangerous. You want to have a deeper understanding, so you're not dangerous, right? You want to have a deeper knowledge, so you have a general sense of what the right approach to a problem or a series of problems are, or an expansion is. And so you're helping the team, you're helping yourself and the team bring to the table all the things that need to be discussed. What's more important, in my opinion, is you're starting to build the people that you're going to continuously work with on the projects that you have. And so if you're friends with a technologist, or if a technologist wants to become friends with a business person, what you're building is this camaraderie between these people, where when they do work together on a project, it just works better because they have this partnership, they have this friendship, they have this debate that goes on between them. They have a common level of understanding of their each individual strengths and weaknesses. And the result of that is just a better team. So it's not always about taking the knowledge from somebody and applying it. That's great if that can happen as well. What is really, I think, more powerful is the fact that because you're working in the same organization, it's about now having a peer or colleague in another group where, as you go into the next cross-functional project, they know you. You're a known person. You're not just a random marketer or data person or product person. You're a known individual. Oh, that's Nathan. Yeah, we have great lunches together. He's a fun person to work with. That sets the mood, right? For a team environment that is more receptive, more open, more diverse, and all the things we know that make great programs and great projects.
I like what you said about team bonding and establish the common understanding between people and team. When it comes to relationship building, what are some actions you take to create a better bond with someone, have a better team dynamic, and better career opportunity? Do you hang out with people outside of work? How would you go about it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I again, family oriented. I spend most of my time at home with the kids and 3 dogs and wife. And so I don't actually get out a ton. Early on, sure, there's the occasional happy hour, and that's a great chance to unwind with your workmates and in a easygoing setting. I've had teams. I personally encourage this, and we do it. We used to do it when in the non-COVID times. Every summer, I would bring in an extended management team, and we would go hiking for the day. And it wasn't about the physical exertion. The hikes weren't that hard. I mean, there were sometimes long hikes, 5, 8, 10-mile hikes, but it was about the time of just walking down a trail with somebody and talking. And what it taught me was, it's great to get out of the office and these just open settings where you can just have a conversation with someone. So, sure, it's important to do office work as well as non-office work in terms of building relationship. But I wouldn't put too much pressure on yourself to say like, I must hang out with them outside the office. And work is work, right? And it's awesome if we can build strong families and strong friendship bonds. But that's not always going to happen. So it doesn't always have to be the goal. And I don't want people to take away that you've got to put pressure on yourself. These things have to come natural, and they're not going to happen overnight. They're going to take time, and they're going to have bumps in the road, and you just got to kind of flow with it. And in some cases, as easy as it is for me to say this, it's harder to do. Not overthink situations.
We just talked about growth strategy as an individual. Now let's look at the growth strategy for your company. When you joined the team, it was a Series A company. How many people were there? What was the vision like back then? You and your team successfully transitioned Chegg from a book rental company to a digital learning services. What were some actions that you took to make the company adapt the transition and grow really fast?
Right. So I joined, I think there was probably like 8 people in the company total.
Wow. That's
It was, there wasn't a lot of us. It was pretty small. And so I think we executed on the vision we had very, very well. We absolutely helped students save time and save money and get access to required materials. Unfortunately, that was not a viable business model. That would have ended us in an insolvency sooner rather than later. I mean, again, as I told you earlier, it was incredibly cash consumptive to buy books for hundreds of dollars and rent them for $30, right? It's not that the model didn't work. It certainly works. It has worked quite well, but it just kept requiring you to feed the cash engine. And so we had to have other revenue streams that were more leverageable in the fact that it's like all digital businesses, high gross margin kind of businesses. As I mentioned earlier, it was always our vision to be more than a book rental company, but it wasn't until Dan Rosensweig came in did we really get a CEO that could plot us down the path for being such an innovative company, for having the courage to make a series of very important, very strategic acquisitions, really starting all the way back when we bought our first writing company, which was at the time one called Imagine Solutions, which was the Easy Bib product, and then from there, math as a discipline. Then from there, Thinkful obviously has been a great kind of advance of our vision. So I think along the way, while we have appended more services to our product line, the vision still remains the same, right? It is about servicing the student. That student doesn't have to be a traditional 18 to 22-year-old person that goes to a 2-year or 4-year college. That person could be someone who's trying to reinvent themselves, someone who's taken time off from the workforce to raise a family that wants to go back. And Chegg, as a company, we've become incredible developers of content. We've become incredible marketers. And since education is moving online, we should be part of that ecosystem. And so we just feel like that's our right as a company.
Chegg acquired a lot of really cool companies. What was the vision before you acquired them, and how do you make them fitting into the ecosystem?
Yeah. So Dan and I are very similar in this. So listen, we live in the Valley. Everyone can build anything, right? Engineers are incredibly talented, incredibly smart. They can build everything. The reality is it always worth building, or is it better to acquire companies that love what they're doing individually, and then collectively, when you bring them together, do you have more services, more jobs to be done, more value for the end consumer? And so our thought process around acquisitions has never really changed. It is one of the services that students need. Okay, we identify the need. We go find the best players in the market. We talk to all the players in the market. You find the folks that have a mission-oriented culture, and then really it's the hardest part, which tends to be the integration, is a lot less time-consuming or as hard as you think it would be if you do the work ahead of time to make sure your cultures fit. Where I've witnessed, not necessarily at Chegg, but at colleagues' companies or friends' companies, where acquisitions have failed, it's basically as a result of, these cultures were never going to get along together. And with an acquisition, it is never about one company's culture. Your goal is to take the best of both companies and make a new culture, because it's not going to be like, how do you replace the last 5 years of someone's life if they were at a company for 5 years prior to buying them and saying, well, what you did 5 years ago doesn't matter anymore. It's now what we do now. Like, that's not a realistic statement. And so as a leader, the first thing I always do with an acquisition is I go around. Prior to COVID, it would be go around the country and go to their offices and talk to everyone and do skip levels with everyone and ask the basic questions. What do you love about working here? What do you hate about working here? What are you excited about? What are you afraid about with this acquisition? And just being human, right? And talking to them, and you realize that drops a lot of that fear, uncertainty, doubt, that FUD that people carry with them. And then you work towards, like, as I was saying earlier, one of the key things that always come out of every acquisition we do is we walk out before we buy the company with a joint roadmap. So that first day that when we walk into that office and we say, this is an amazing day, you're now part of a much bigger organization, we're part of a bigger mission, here's the roadmap that we're going to go execute together as an organization. And time and time again, people have been like, yeah, I want that. I want to be on that ride with you, versus being like, I want it like it used to be, right? Because there's always messiness and integration, right? There's HR things that go on. There's technical things that go on. There's, I have to move a manager. I didn't want to move a manager. There's those things. That's a natural course of an acquisition. But if you can get people bought into a mission, a product vision, the goals that you're going to achieve as a result of the new organization, it's really not that difficult.
Wow, I really like that you have conversation with people who work at the company that you and the team is trying to acquire to get a feel of the company, to make sure there's a culture fit, creating the joint roadmap together. I think it's great. We're at the last part of our episode, which is the SVP special. I have some questions for you. Who made the biggest impact in your career? What's your favorite book? And who would you invite to your dinner party?
Okay. Let me take them in reverse order. So inviting to my dinner party. So I'm a bit of a foodie. So Thomas Keller, because I just would love to sit down with Thomas Keller and just talk food. I think it would be amazing. And that's probably a lame answer, but I've taken his master classes. They're phenomenal. And I clearly will never be able to cook like him. But you know what? We can all aspire. And he's a great teacher. So sitting down and learning from him would be a wonderful moment. So book Barbarians at the Gate. Phenomenal book. From someone who was, again, a history and English major. I read it when I was in college, and it opened my eyes to a world in business that I didn't really know existed, in the world of management and leverage buyouts. And it was a historical nonfiction. So it fit what I like to read. And then it just opened my eyes up to a whole business world that I didn't know existed. And I thought it was a phenomenal book to read. Last question. What was the other one?
Who made the biggest impact?
Who made the biggest impact in my life? Wow. That's a tough one. I've had a series of, I have a really good friend that has made a bigger impact in my life than he probably realizes. And he worked at Chegg. He was actually the CTO that I became really good friends with. And because we approached things at such different angles, he was always there to, when I was down on myself, to be like, you're just not looking at it the right way. Look at it this way, or no, you're down on yourself for the wrong reasons. And so there was always one, because I always had great people around me to problem solve stuff with, but this one person in particular, who was our former CTO and at one point former chief product officer, he was always there as kind of like a rock. So, while it's important, I think, to have people that are like figureheads in your life of saying like, wow, look at all their accomplishments. It's equally important to have someone who can be your kind of your sounding board, not just for your ideas, but also for your emotions. Because, sometimes in your career, it can be an emotional roller coaster. Right. Working for a company for 12 years, you have good days and you have bad days. It's just the reality of life. And having someone that can get you through those bad days and realize for you that even though it's a bad day, it's still 99% good. It's just that 1% that throws you into the bad. That's a huge thing to have, and that person's been probably the most influential in my life.
Wow, I'm really happy for you that you built such a deep, meaningful friendship and relationship with the CTO of Chegg. So I have one last question. We recently just added this question is, where can we find you if you are not at work? So, which is how do you spend your free time, basically?
Yeah, no, I get it. It's either in the garden. I garden a lot. Trail running. Which is the other passion, or kayaking. That's where you can find. So, somewhere on the ocean. But good luck finding me there.
Thank you so much for coming, Nathan. And
thank you very much, Grace, for having me. It was a pleasure. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too. That's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Smart Venture Podcast. If you like it, please leave us a quick review and hit subscribe so you don't miss any tip from the experts. If you want to receive our updates, please leave your email at smartventurepod.com. If you want to connect with me, all my socials are at Grace Gong GG. Besides LinkedIn, it's just Grace Gong. I'd love to connect with you and let me know your thought about the show. Now you can also listen to Smart Venture Podcast on YouTube. Go to smartventurepod.com, click YouTube link on the top banner. Don't forget to hit subscribe and smash the like button. See you next time.